Everybody in the spiritual community has stories about UFOs, healing, and empowerment. But what is the truth? This guy has been searching for the truth for many, many years. And his name is Neil Gaur, and he is the owner of Portal to Ascension. I want to welcome everybody to the show. Today we have Mr. Neil Gaur on the show. He's been a leader in the game since 2008, and it'll be exciting to talk to him about what he does in the spiritual space and how he pulls off these tours. He was raised Hindu. He lives in California. I want to welcome Neil Gaur to the show.
Good to be here with you, John. Thanks for having me, brother.
We had a few little conversations, and I'm excited to talk to you more. And you seem like a very inquisitive person.
Definitely.
Like a searcher. What led you down this road to be so massively involved with this Portal of Ascension and doing these shows and teaching people different things? What is this to you?
Sure. Well, I'm a very curious person, that's for sure. And my curiosity has just led me down a pathway of looking into many topics. And at this moment, I'm very fortunate to have a platform that if I'm interested or curious in a topic, I can do a large-scale event on it. And many times I learn a lot of information from putting on a 2-day conference on one topic. Like I did a 2-day conference on Atlantis. I did a 2-day conference on Lemuria. I did one on 100,000 years of Indian history. So I get an opportunity to go really deep. But how it really started was that I was, as you shared, I was raised Hindu, right? And because I was raised Hindu, I was never imposed that this was the only way, right? Like many religions in the world, especially the Abrahamic religions, all have, there is no other religion but this one. This is the true religion. And because that wasn't the case, I was open and had experienced, I celebrated Christmas my whole life, and I knew a lot about Yeshua. By the time I was like 11, I knew a lot of information on him and watched so many movies. I even went to Catholic school for a year as I was living in England. And then I knew about Moses and other world religions. So I was curious as to why is it okay for me to believe that these religions also existed alongside our own, but they say that there is no other religion. And I was seeing that, I was told many times, especially when I was in Catholic school for that year, that these two, that pagan religions, polytheistic religions, multiple gods, and monotheistic religions with one god, both grew separately from each other. There was no connection. There was no similarities. There is no crossover. And when I was 17, 18 years old in 2000, I started seeing the opposite of that. I started seeing that stories within Christianity mirrored stories within Hinduism. But these two faiths supposedly are completely separate. And so the beginning was realizing Krishna and Christ, Jesus Christ connection and their similarities in their story. And I started thinking, is it the same story manifested over and over again in different areas of the world? Or maybe there's an older story that everything was reiterated afterwards. So that really just started me becoming very curious about it all. So that was probably more of the grounded, practical reason why I started the search. But then on a higher level, I always felt that there was something off on the planet, that things weren't as they could have been. And now in retrospect, I realize it was me realizing that there is a better way for humanity to live on Earth, a way that works for everyone, not just the select few, right? And because of that underlying desire to figure out what that was and heal from traumas that had happened to me as a child, I went down a journey of deep searching and curiosity.
Interesting. Well, I've always said that if you took religion, and you can see right here on the screen, if you took a religion and it was one timeline, and this religion was one definition, we are created by one. We're supposed to be, creation is one. You take a piece here, you take a piece here, you take a piece here, and you adapt that narrative to your interest. Mm-hmm. Based on that piece you're pulling from the religion timeline. And that's perpetuated over time. And now we have multiple religions.
Yeah.
So why are we so naive to think that one's person religion is better than the other.
Right. And as I did the deep dive on religions, I started realizing that all the basic things that are the good stuff within the religions were all throughout all of them. And Zoroastrianism is a good place to start. Their concept is good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. That's the premise of their religion, right? And even the 10 Commandments, you see 12 commandments in Egypt. The 10 Commandments came from Egypt. Even Hinduism was not a religion. It was called Dharma, which literally mean laws of the universe. Laws of the universe. And it was just telling you how to live in harmony with the universe and other people on the planet. But then what seems to have happened is, I say organized religion is cosmic truth plus man-made BS added upon it. All these stories, these dramas, political agendas, control systems, that's all been taken on it. But when you really get down to the core of it all, I would say most of these religions say the same thing.
Well, one thing that caught my attention too, I come from a very small town, Forest City, North Carolina, or Ballstick, North Carolina, if you want to get real small. Had one stoplight in the town. Now, if you think about that, and you think about the structure of that, because I went to Mississippi, my daughter's going to Ole Miss, and I do a lot of tours in comedy. I've done 700 shows in comedy, from 200 people to 5,000 people.
Nice.
So I was in Mobile, Alabama, and in Mississippi, they have these like squares, and they have like this, I guess, the town hall in the center, and that's the downtown area square. So when I went to Oxford, where Ole Miss is, they had exactly the same design as they had in Mobile that was in Oxford. If you think about small towns around America, if you take a small town, you create this small environment, you put a church there, you can control the narrative in a small community because there's not that much information.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if these small towns around America were set up by design because it isolates the information for religion itself, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that one?
I've never thought of it like that, but I definitely wouldn't doubt it at this point. So much has happened in order to exert control in people and to create, I guess, a level of arrogance and being narrow-minded where you're not accepting of the other, right? And whenever you isolate communities for a long period of time, their whole belief system becomes completely separate from something, next to them. So that's quite a possibility. One thing's for sure is that organized religion in general has been co-opted, and a lot of elite political movements pretty much utilize it to push their own agenda rather than what is the core of what religion was supposed to be about.
Well, the other thing is, I always say that there's two mindsets in the world, and I think I say this every show. There's a discovery mindset and there's a creation mindset. I think 98% of the population has a discovery mindset. And wherever you land on that discovery could be light or dark.
Mm-hmm.
But if you understand creation the right way, you can get to answers quicker. Does that make sense to you? Because that's how I think. I think from a creation standpoint, and I think that we're not going back far enough. When I have this information coming through that was 4.6 billion years ago at the beginning of creation, and that these areas that are the oldest at the beginning of creation is where all the natives lived until we flooded those areas or did whatever and ran them out of there.
Right.
Think about that. Why are we not going back further? That's a lot of time.
Oh, yeah, even further. Yeah, if you look at all the ancient stories, they all pretty much say that how everything manifests into where it is now. And then we have the duality that has been created and harnessed by the powers that be, if you will, in order to create division. But all of them pretty much say the same thing, which is us connecting to a greater understanding of the fact that we're all in this together. And so I feel part of this awakening is us coming to a harmony that we see that we have more in common with each other than we have that is separate. And religion and many other things have just created it in a way where we think that the other is going to take away from our freedom, our ability to be, our sovereignty, and all that. But ultimately, all humans want the same thing. We want love, connection, you know?
Now, you started in this a while back, 2008.
Yeah.
You were ahead of its time. And I mean, my friends that I hung around, we were kind of ahead of our time. I mean, we were doing a sizzle reel with Eric Niche 20 years ago called The Healer on David Sandoval's ranch. And
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really pay attention. I was like the least person to really pay attention how I should have paid attention at the time until I understood that Dave's food system, even
Yeah.
though it's MLM, is actually a foundational process
Yeah.
with taking the amino, getting your muscles in an anabolic state, and then the superfoods cleansing your body and your body parts. That's
Right.
very foundational. A lot of people don't realize that, how far ahead Dave's product is, and he kind of taints it a little bit, I think, because it's MLM, but that's what he had to do. So when you think about progression, what narratives have changed for you through this progression till now?
Well, before 2012, not just for me, but for many people, many speakers, a lot of them still very well known, were waiting for something, waiting for a date. And a lot of people were waiting for December 21st, 2012, as the prophecy said that there was going to be a shift. So there were shifts on the planet. But it wasn't like a neon sign in the sky saying game over, next dimension begins today. There wasn't like UFOs landing and mass disclosure. A lot of people, including myself, had that feeling that that was potentially going to happen, that there was going to be a big shift on that date. And so many of my perspectives have shifted a long time, but I would say after 2012, I created my first live conference in November 2012, 1 month before the end of the world, right? And the reason why I did that was because I was trying to go out with a bang, create a big conference before everything shifted. I didn't even create any events for after 2012. I literally was waiting for December 21st before I decided what I was going to do in 2013 because I didn't know what would happen. I know speakers that went down to Chichen Itza that were waiting for the Quetzalcoatl to come back down, right? So what I've noticed happen after 2012 is a sense of presence and embodiment. Now, people have said to me in the past, people have been upset at the word ascension. And because they feel that word, some people, most people don't feel this way, is some level of escapism, ascension, leaving, moving forward, escaping, getting saved by the ETs. But to me, the universe exists in a paradox. The only way that we can have an ascended reality, ascended world, is by finding the beauty in the moment. That's paradoxical. How can you create a beautiful, harmonious, utopian future? Well, only if you find the beauty in this moment. Because if you're looking always for something in the future, the universe, being one big Xerox machine, is just going to give you back whatever you're reflecting out there. You're reflecting things aren't ready, aren't where they should be. You're going to get that. You're going to have anxiety along the whole process. The shift for a lot of people, I noticed, definitely for myself, was a sense of being grounded in the work and being present with what we do rather than waiting for a future date. There was a lot of predictions before 2012, and they still are now. Maybe we might get into a couple of them on UFO disclosure, being in a couple of years, everybody knowing that we could possibly not be alone in the universe. But the level of always waiting for something to happen in the future to make change. When this happens, then I'll make change. If this happens, then I'll feel this way, right? That's been a huge shift in my life, is really just being present and finding the beauty in everything that's around me.
Well, it's very interesting because I have this thing about science, and science only using two parts of law of attraction to determine, answers for humanity. So if you think about the Newtonian model of reality, which puts us behind the curve, we should have never accepted that. I mean, that's the dumbest thing on the face of the planet. And then Einstein and Oppenheimer, they weren't that smart. God didn't want us to split an atom. So because science set them up as these smart guys, they kind of set them up for failure because they're only using two parts of law of attraction, and they landed on the dark side of discovery. That's where the discovery and creation mindset comes from. So when you think about that, And you think about the quantum field. So we've created, because of that structure, we've created a realm of physics that's not even real.
Yeah.
And we have all these scholars, supposable scholars around the world, operating on a realm of physics that is completely wrong based on creation. And I can say that very sternly. So, speaking to what you're saying, people have been in that mode until now and not realizing that you can predetermine life. And I have the structure for that. And I don't know how I have the structure for that, but you can predetermine life. You can predetermine things if you stay ahead of the narrative. So if we understood astrology better, and if science used all three parts of law of attraction, then we could operate in the realm of physics, which is the quantum field that God created for us to use to the betterment of humanity. Why do you think we've been blocked off until now? Because I think the narratives are finally leading to maybe we can be ahead of this. We can predetermine this, because that's what I wrote my book about. I wrote my book about social media content and how to put out a tone, and whatever tone responds to your tone, because tone attracts tone, that demographic is the demographic you need to focus on to predetermine your business based on the tone you're putting out to the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you shared, especially with the quantum element, because that's exactly what I talk about as well. And the whole thing is that we are everything is, both sides are valid, right? Like, for example, in Newtonian world, they were able to gauge reality based on the limitations of their perceivable senses. This happens, this has cause and reaction. Okay, because they had limited frequency range. They couldn't expand it all. What's happening now on the planet is our expansion. Our consciousness is expanding. Our ability to process frequencies are expanding. The stimulation and information is expanding. And as we're doing that, we're piercing through the veil. So I would say Newtonian physics is you being in a video game and you knocking on a door and knowing that in the video game you need to knock on that door for it to open. Quantum physics is you seeing the code of what made you even have the ability to knock on the door, and maybe even recoding that code to expand the ability of what you're able to do. It's this and that. Now, you asked the question of what do you think is the reason why that we haven't been able to tap into that quantum expansion? And there's two reasons. There's always the reason of us being a victim to this reality, which is the controllers. They impose this on us. There's a Saturn moon matrix. There's a frequency grid on the Earth. The angle of our Earth is at a tilt, not allowing for full expansion of our consciousness. And so much more. And then there's the higher perspective, which is that Earth has been going through 25,000 to 26,000 years cycles of consciousness, where we've gone through devolutions and evolutions over and over and over. And even though the controllers were the actors that played out the role of us to feel that we had no control, we're now in an upturn in consciousness. And in the upturn in consciousness, our solar system literally is in a different place in our galaxy. And all these gifts start coming online. And in my opinion, it's the age of great remembrance. We start realizing that we're so much more than what we think we are, we thought we were. What we thought we were was Newtonian world. What we truly are might be even only scratching the surface. The quantum world might just be another element of something even bigger, So what we're getting into now is realizing, like, wow, we are multidimensional beings. Reality as we know it isn't really real. Solidity isn't really solid. So these are the questions that we're having, and it's the beginning phases of us restructuring what we believe reality is. And the eventual, I guess, result of this, I feel, is going to be us having abilities that we can't even fathom at this moment, including gifts like telepathy, and including certain types of technologies that will take us into space.
Well, going back to the small town example, you apply law of attraction to that small town. It's a controlled environment, and these small town people can accept, there's certain things that you accept naturally, but there's things you accept by choice. You move to Foundation, right? Which is the second part of the law of attraction. We'll say a church, that's the foundation. It doesn't move past that because everything's supposed to be right here in this foundation of this church. This esoteric world is supposed to be right here. So when you walk outside that church, there's no more thought process. There's no more connection to spirit when you can be connected to spirit directly. Think about that. That's kind of structured that way. So, and then the coding thing you said, this is another thing that popped in my head, was how we predetermine humanity is we understand our environment before someone's born. And if we know someone's birth date using feng shui and the 4 pillars, we're going to identify the environment. A kid is born just by their birth date, which is codes in the quantum field. Your birth date is a code. You have your directions. You have your directions for wealth. You have your directions for success. You have your directions for relationships. If we understand our environment and a kid is born and we can align them the right way just based on their birthday, and this is what I wrote my book about, we can eliminate the bad customer. Because how many people have gotten married and they put a round peg in a square hole and they're in the wrong marriage because they don't link. They're not aligned. So we're going to, first of all, we're going to align humans the right way. Then we're going to teach you that, all right, we're going to explain lineage trauma and how that is a wound that you're carrying can become a gash. We're going to teach you about that. And if you encounter something that could trigger that to become a wound, and then we're going to explain to you that your subconscious is going to be programmed to a certain point of life, and then you start responding to things with your unconscious bias. Now, I don't really believe in yin and yang because creation is one. It's it's not really, one doesn't support the other. If we are creation is one, your sensibilities are centered. It's understanding where your sensibilities go based on your actions before you get there. To me, it's not that hard. We know our environments, we know our birth dates for alignment, and we can show you how to center your sensibilities through life based on your programming and how it's set up today. Because people wonder why they act like they do, because they've never been taught what the subconscious does to someone's life.
Exactly.
Have you ever heard anything like that?
Yes. Well, not in the way that you put it, but definitely parts of it, right? And especially the part of our subconscious mind just reflecting externally. And we're so unaware of all the different beliefs and things that are ingrained in us, reflecting the world that we might not be comfortable with. But as you just shared, we have the information now to really show through psychology, through quantum physics, that this exists. And a part of the restructuring of society, I think, is the re-education of humanity, and having institutions and schools start basically showing what we truly are and what we're capable of, and how we manifest our reality, how we reflect in this quantum world, how do we project this hologram? You know what I mean? And then finding out ways to project it even more intentionally and consciously. And you know what you shared about also astrology, we have all these maps to help us navigate through this world. Even the ancients left information about our galaxy so we can avoid catastrophes and have a reset on Earth. We even have information about cycles, when there will be the next great flood, when there will be an asteroid that comes. The ancient people left it there. And if we can not only re-educate based on the information we're finding now, but also incorporate what has been told to us by our ancient civilizations, that is, I think, a recipe for success for our evolution.
What I just talked about, like if you took my philosophy, you read my book, and you understand that foundation, it's a pretty simple process to me because it's just in my head. But people, when I tell people they don't know what it is, this has been around in my head for years. And it keeps developing. Like, the tags keep improving the process. So when you think about civilizations, and this is what makes my head hurt. So you take the spiritual world, you have all these fractions of spirituality. This guy over here is doing this person over here is doing this, and they're selling their part of spirituality. But everybody doesn't have a great, experience because it may not be for them, and it kind of shuns them to the spiritual world. Now, if we took this foundation I wrote about in my book and utilize this the right way, and we had 5 specialists in the spiritual world, we're going to teach the human, the person, humanity about the foundation, and then whatever they align with, whatever their tone is, because tone attracts tone. It's just like your friends. You probably hang around the same type of people that have a similar tone to you. So if you understand that foundation, you're going to have tones attracted to different pieces of spirituality because they know what the foundation is. You may have a tone that's attracted to healing with plant medicine. You may have a tone that's attracted to healing with someone like Antonio Harmon. You may have a tone that is attracted to someone like Sarah Bressman Cosme. I think if people that are on the outside of the spiritual space, if we can teach them about this foundation and give them better alignment, I think that you can bring more people from the outside in and then align them with the right person in the spiritual space that they are attracted to and what's going to work for them.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody has a different thing that they resonate with, and not everything works for everyone.
Yeah.
And a part of that would also be what we've been speaking about, the quantum world, which is why I love speaking about the science behind spirituality. So another element to really bring people into this world is to appease the linear mind, because so many people are just linearly minded. The other part is shut down quite often. And so, but through linear information, you can still prove that we're all interconnected in one. And even through quantum physics now is the best way. Non-locality, entanglement, double slit experiment. All of these things, when you philosophically look at what the results are, you can't help but question, what else is there? What is this, right? How does this make any sense? So I feel like that's a good way to get to people that aren't in this space. And then that's when they can get into whoever is the best person for them to get whatever they need, right? Whether it's a past life regression or things like that. Because a lot of times people throw the baby out with the bathwater because they're in this bubble, and then all of a sudden they see like somebody channeling, right? And then like, oh my God, this person is just making things up, right? Not realizing the in-between phase of it all is, what is the nature of reality really? And what ways are we able to bend reality in order to have different types of, gifts and abilities within it?
Going back to science again, and this is really confused people. If you watch Star Wars is probably the most spiritual franchise ever made. So the
dark
Jedi,
side, the Force, yeah, come on now.
The Jedis they always would say absolutes don't work.
Yeah.
It says absolutes don't work in the Bible. Science keeps things non-linear and absolutes. So why are we back in science if it keeps things non-linear and we're standing on an absolute when it tells us in the Bible that absolutes don't work?
Well, that's the thing. That's what science has become. Because original science used to be philosophy, and the philosophy is never an absolute. It's always a constant evolving question, an exploration of something. And what's happened now in, I don't know, maybe the last century or so, maybe even before that, right? Like that it's really become to a point where, okay, because I have this result through this study, this is the only result. There's nothing more than that. Through that, that's like, it's almost like telling someone 200 years ago that, we're going to be able to create craft that can fly into the air and even in space. And they're like, no, science says that we cannot do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we lean into the curiosity and the possibilities, the more we're able to evolve technologically.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce Lee in 1972, he did this video.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they whacked him because of it or whatever, but I don't want to create a conspiracy theory. But, he did this video and he would say, if you create a style or you create a topic and that topic becomes the gospel, you crystallize growth.
Wow. So
in
well
1972.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what's happened with science for the most part. But we have breakthroughs because even though that's what's happening on the mainstream, what we're finding out through UFO disclosure, UFO crash retrievals, is that even these people that are showing us that are in the background working on technology that breaks anything based on Newtonian physics or what we think this world is.
Now I want to ask you this. Now this I'm not dialed in as much because I just think everything is a fraction of source. And if it's not source, it can't be as strong as source no matter what it is. So if God has done this, because I saw on your thing, you've kind of specialist in this UFO stuff. My thought is, I talked to R.L. Poole on the podcast, and R.L. Poole says he's been abducted his whole life. Several times, hundreds of times maybe.
Yeah.
When I talked to him, I had this green light go off in my head about that. I said, all right, if there's 53 ancient civilizations and God has done this before, and it's repeat, there's not enough bodies for souls. People that they come down here and test and prod and take blood from are actually, I think they're like guinea pigs for that civilization. That's why everybody is not messed with. We lump that narrative as absolute. That's going to affect everybody. Let's fear-based. What do you think about that?
Okay, so let me get clarity. You're saying that the 53 civilizations before us.
Yeah.
Your question was the Bible doesn't allow for that many souls to have existed, or what is?
Well, what I'm saying is if this process is 4.6 billion years old,
yeah,
and you have these different civilizations that have their own way of life, and the whole thing is recreating bodies based on the divine technology.
Yeah,
and they're having a hard time.
Literally are working on cloning bodies.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So there's bloodlines that are attached to a civilization that when these civilizations come down and check, they're only messing with people within their bloodline and within their civilization. That's what I think it is. I think that's why not everybody is messed with, because there's different aspects of this process. That's just the feeling I got with R.L. Poole in talking to him for several months.
They have been, it's very interesting he said 53, because it's been a question for me for quite some time, how many ancient civilizations existed before us? Because we have gone through these cycles, and in these cycles we have evolutions and devolutions. Now Atlantis supposedly ended around 13,000 years ago, right? And you already know how mystical and esoteric the concept of Atlantis is, and how some people say they can prove it, many people say they can't, and it's like a pie in the sky like dream based on Plato's information. A lot of people say that. Now, I believed Atlantis existed. I don't think it was called Atlantis because the Greeks are the ones that gave it that name, and but that's only the last rendition. So if we're thinking of that last great civilization in a way where we can't even know if it existed, imagine going back 52 more past that. How far back does it go? One thing's for sure is something that's been released in the last few years is the the placement of the Earth's crust, and the geography of the Earth shifts way more often than we think it has. Meaning there's crustal displacement, where sometimes we have shifts on the Earth where literally the tectonic plates rearrange itself. Conventional information at this point. And what happens in those is it's so catastrophic on Earth, complete wipeout of evidence of anything, right? And many of these civilizations existed underwater. Now, what's the least excavated place in the world? Under the oceans, the waters, right? We have excavated some places, and guess where they are? Off the coast of countries, not deep in the oceans anywhere else. Another place that's the least excavated in the world, the Sahara Desert. Why is it the least excavated? Well, because technically speaking, conventionally, 4,000 years ago, when we supposedly became advanced for the first time ever in history, the Sahara Desert was a desert and no one would have lived there. Why would we excavate it? But if you look at Egypt's true dating, at least 13,000 years ago, the Sahara was a lush oasis. The north and the southern hemispheres were completely covered in ice. So that's just a side note. I'll get back to your point now. So these civilizations that created beings like the Anunnaki story, when you're saying that, really connected to the Anunnaki story of these beings creating other beings, like as whether it's a workforce or something like that. Many of these ancient civilizations, including ETs, created beings and then they fragmented their own soul into that being to have an experience. Because in the higher dimensions, you're able, when you create beings in lower dimensions, you're able to simultaneously exist in those two realities, because technically time isn't what we think it is, right? And you're able to do that. So many beings, the Syrians, the Pleiadians, and the Lyrans, when they did the genetic hybridization, the Lyran souls were coming into the human bodies. I'll say one more thing before I hear what you have to say about this, is that you also mentioned them creating bloodlines and then incarnating into, right? Which is very interesting, because Dolores Cannon had spoke about this through her regressions she was doing. And she had found out that up until the 1940s, specific ETs were incarnating into specific ethnic groups only. For example, the Hebrew bloodline was all Arcturian. And not only is the cultural difference, like me being Indian, I'm half human, half alien, which is why I look like this. You are half human, half a different type of alien. Oversimplifying with the equations here and the percentage, but that is the variation. Our language was inspired by these different civilizations as well. What happened in the 1940s was the first nuclear bomb test. And what she was getting from her regressions was that there was actually an agreement, a soul agreement, that it was easier for souls from specific civilizations in the universe to incarnate into specific bloodlines that had the closest DNA connection to that civilization, that root race. But after after the first bomb and World War I began, they went ahead and took out that law of the universe, and now beings were able to incarnate into different ethnic groups. And the reason for that was, and that's when the population increased as well. And the reason for that was that there was a call out to the universe. Hey, these humans have now split the atom. They are now literally putting bombs in the computer program of what this world is. They're breaking the quantum world. What happens when you break the quantum world is that energy affects other realities that are simultaneously stacked around us. And so she said that the law of one ethnic group for one race left in order for there to be a call out to the universe for more souls to incarnate on Earth, so that they can actually make some shifts and changes and assist in the awakening process.
Well, I have a feeling that there was a bloodline showed up that God didn't expect, that threw everything off.
Could be. Like, what would you say? Like kind of like the reptilian story?
I don't know if it's reptilian, because like the reptilian thing, I was confused about that, because I had friends that were supposable dragons and reptilians, and I was like, what is good? What's good? What's bad? But then I realized that, believe it or not, accidentally, because I hadn't practiced this, accidentally, I removed the 1,000-year-old deity from my cousin. I had a conversation through telepathy with this thing, because my cousin was able to repeat what this thing said while he was meditating. Sounds crazy. It happened. We were 10 feet away. I wasn't saying shit. I kept asking the thing what its name was, what its name was, what its name was. It was like a mother and father talking to each other. And they would talk shit. They would say, love and light, John, love and light. You're here in Curacao to sit on your feelings. You're here to Curacao to sit on your feelings. Do what you're supposed to do. Don't get tricky with me. I know you're smart. Don't get tricky with me. And I kept saying, what is your name? What is your name? What is your name? And then she got pissed, confrontational, because something didn't seem right. And I said, Josh, what does this thing look like? It looked like, and he said, it looked like a mummy. And it was like some light when he would meditate. It was like some room he would go into. And somehow, like I said, he could repeat what this thing said. Finally told me her name. And when she finally told me her name, she says, I'm more powerful than you. Don't even try it. But then when she broke and gave me her name, I guess there was something to that. All of a sudden, she's like, I gotta go. She was gone. So when I thought about that and the experience I had with my cousin 2 days prior to this happening, because I'm diarrhea of the mouth. If I feel like somebody needs something, I just say it. Mm-hmm. So it's a very intense 2 days. And after that, things changed. So it made me realize that these dark entities that attach through trauma have a big effect on people's lives. And let's say if you perpetuate that, because I've always thought too that there's certain people that get to a certain point and they can't cross back over. So if you perpetuate that, you could end up with a dark entity that doesn't have enough light to get to the light. That's the reptilians. Yeah. It's actually a human, is the reptilians. I don't know why we call them reptilians. I call that the Disney movie effect. But we have all these low-level entities stuck here or been perpetuated, over and over and over because that bloodline was perpetuated. It was reproduced.
Well, it's kind of like a downward fractal, right? It's like, it's when you're perpetuating things, you go so far deep down in the fractal, it's like it takes twice as much effort to go back up that hill than it is when you came down it, right? So now I feel that all types of beings exist in the universe, and there's definitely reptilian beings, there's dragon beings. Only 5% of reptilian beings are nefarious. Most of them are actually positive, and they don't affect us. But what you're saying about this entity is interesting because the oneness became duality. Duality eventually became polarity. Polarity eventually became good and evil. And so even the darkness is a part of the original singularity. But we're in such a lower density that the darkness no longer sees itself in the light. Yeah. It's fractalized so far it doesn't recognize itself in that. So what you're getting at is this: it becomes a perpetuation that just pulls you further and further away from any type of harmony. So what really, guys, needs to happen is something to disrupt that energy, to bring it back to the light. Which is why so many people, when they do like healings, when they're doing like, there's those paranormal investigators and they do things and mediumship, what are they doing? They always are sending that entity back into the light, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost like a reconciliation between the two polarities.
Antonio said to me, she's like, yeah, my friend saw this creature on the wall. I said, if there's these other civilizations have the same process. So there could be these entities that have this total darkness effect on them that don't look like us. They've been around for thousands of years. That's where the Disney movie comes into play. It's not like that's coming from us. And I think that's where this stuff starts to confuse people. I think we have to separate it, align it the right way. I think a lot of these narratives that are put out in the media, it's like it's such new information, people are accepting anything. You know what I mean? They're not even really, because they don't know, there's no foundation for it. That's why, going back to the foundation, I was like, shit, how can we do this the right way?
Well, it's interesting because there's two sides. There's people that don't accept anything, and then there's those that accept everything. So it's like, that's why discernment is key. And listening to your own inner compass, inner guidance, because so much of what we believe is based on what we've been told, right? So it's like truly what is true to ourselves. And that's what we're learning. It's not one extreme or the other extreme. To me, the truth almost always lies somewhere in between.
What do you feel like your biggest sensibility is? Because I think, creativity and intuitiveness comes from a sensibility. What is yours?
And sensibility, you don't mean being sensible. You mean like my senses, right?
Yeah, like, is it eyesight? Is it auditory? Is it clairsentient?
Yeah. I would say definitely I got a good head on me.
Yeah.
I'm into information quite a lot. My music is my favorite way to express it. Hip hop, spoken word, things like that. So that would be information. I'm also a gatherer and a networker of people. I bring people together and I give people a platform through Portal to Ascension to get their word out. So the way that this is all manifested is creating this platform we've done so much, tens of thousands of hours of content, thousands of different speakers, And so at this moment, I'm utilizing my skills in order to provide a platform for people, whether they're known or not known, to get their message out to the world.
Now, family, your lineage, you have kids?
Nope.
Wife? No kids?
I had a wife, ex-wife 3.5 years ago, so no longer.
Getting married again?
I'm open to anything, man. We'll see what happens,
I hear you. How about parents? I mean, where are your parents at?
Parents are in Orange County. So I was born in England. And then when I was 12 years old, I moved to Irvine, California. But my family, we're all Indian. So we're from a state called Punjab, which is like the furthest north state in India. And so I have that Indian ancestry as well, which is why, I was raised Hindu, but I never really believed any of it. And then when I woke up to all this information, I started seeing that, Hinduism is one of the faiths in the world that still has a lot of truth hidden within the text, a lot of science, a lot of awareness in there as well. And so it kind of, getting into this world brought me back to, the faith that I was raised in. I wouldn't consider myself Hindu. I'm non-dogmatic. I don't really follow dogma because there's too many rules within that. I feel that we have only scratched the surface of what spirituality really is and what God is. We have such a limited perspective on it.
One question too is I came up with this thing that God created everything by 4. Yeah, I don't know where this came through, and I'm like, it's understanding creation. Because I talked to this guy who translated the Theoba prophecy, and I knew that the universe was in 4 parts. The information in Theoba prophecy said that God had created the universe with 4 powers. Now let's go to the planetary system. Now you have 4 terrestrial planets, you have 4 gas planets. I think the gas planets, this cube thing, I don't know, that doesn't resonate with me. And how they are infatuated with that. I think the gas planets represent the sensibilities of the human, and then the 4 terrestrial planets, right? So if you look at this alignment, if I look at the sun as the root chakra, Venus, Mercury, Earth would be the heart chakra. That's 4 from the root up, 4 in the middle, right? Then you have Mars would be the throat chakra. The third eye is the moon, and the crown chakra is Pluto. Earth is right in the middle. Now let's go to Earth. There's 4 parts to the Earth: inner core, outer core, mantle, crust. You have 4 directions. You're made of 4 humors. There's 4 gases. There's 4 blood types. Your brain is in 4 parts. Your heart's in 4 parts. And this is all tied to the pineal gland. A lot of people don't realize that the pineal gland is God's data center. So when I thought about this process and this speaks to the quantum field as well, we're tied to creation, how we are one. We're tied to creation through our pineal gland, because when I started looking at the Egyptian eye symbol. So when I looked at that symbol, in the bone, there's the bone, they represent the bone in that symbol. So when I looked at that, and this is blow your mind because I've never heard anybody else talk about this, is when I looked at that and how we're tied to creation, to the human body, you put that bone on a flat surface, it's a 1/4 slant that's in our head.
That's very interesting. Well, because, the Eye of Horus also is musical intervals, that it's 1/36, 1/16, 1/4. Each of those parts of the eye is a fraction, and they're all divisible by 4 as well, which is interesting.
I think that's how, like, if we can understand that's the answers to the quantum field, is the creation of 4 and how it's linear. And I spoke to some scientists about this, and they said, you'll never get there. I said, why not? It's in my head. I've read 1 book and half the Bible. How can I have this information in my head and can tell you that God created with 4 powers all the way to a 1/4 slant bone into our head, which is supposed to be God's data center? That's pretty deep.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And, this information, I feel, as you're sharing right here, the more and more information that comes out, more people wake up. And if we can use this data as foundation for the new paradigm we're creating, sky's really the universe is the limit on what we're able to achieve.
What we're talking about before, this thing in Lake Lure, me thinking that, going to the pineal gland and thinking Lake Lure is 1 pineal gland, or there's 1 of 4 of the pineal glands, because there's a pineal gland representation of the pineal gland in each quadrant. So when I looked at that geography and I saw the 2 quadrants on each side of the granite monolith in Lake Lure, Back Cave quadrant, Lake Lure quadrant, Broad River flows through all the way to Atlantic Ocean. That could represent a corner, 1/4 of the corner of the world that flowed into Atlantis pre-flood, because if you look at the crest of the Atlantic Ocean, you put a head there because the monolith is looking east, the Sphinx is looking east. So you put a head there, you're looking east. Pre-flood, it would make sense. It would be a pineal gland there. So then I said, all right, what does quadrant represent spiritually? Quadrants represent temple. We have 2 temples on each side of our head, which would put our pineal gland in the center in Lake Lure. The other interesting thing about that area in Lake Lure, North Carolina, is from the granite monolith, there's a bottomless pool. They've never found the bottom. In the Bible, talked about bottomless pools. That's where God put the devil, put all the demons, so forth. So when you think about science about that, and you put the swirling water in there, And this is right around from the granite monolith. A vortex is right up on the hill. I feel like a superhero up there when I do energy work up there, because his nose started pouring out, his ears started pouring out, his started sweating, he had to quit. But when you think about that bottomless pool, that's sucking the negative energy out of that area. A good lawyer told me I'm too old to believe in coincidences. Nobody's ever even talked about this up there. And the other thing, there's only one type of salamander. It's the only place in the world. It's a species. It's the king of salamanders. If you understand salamanders live based on the quality of water. If that's the king of all salamanders and that's the only species in the world, then that's the best water in the world coming out of that area in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've never heard that information before, but a lot of people have shared their own ideas, and I feel that's coming through you for a reason.
How do we find you, Neil?
Sure.
I think we've had a great conversation, and hopefully people can learn some stuff from this talk we've had.
Definitely. So portaltoascension.org is the best way. You can go there. I have a newsletter sign up. I do 70 events a year. We got 3 live in-person conferences next year. We're doing a cruise to Greece and Turkey. We have a music festival coming up. So we're doing a lot. So if you sign up at portaltoascension.org, portaltoascension.org, you'll get on a newsletter and you'll receive all the updates. Everyone who signs up also gets access to our website with 3,000 hours of content just given for free as a gift to you guys. For signing up, you can navigate through using categories. You can search for speakers. It's a really robust platform with a lot of data and information there and experiences as well. And then my own personal website that I just launched is Neil, Neil, Arcturus.com, neilarcturus.com. And I'll just say in August, I'm starting a 3-month course, a live course called the Shadow Workers course. So if you're interested, go to portaltoascension.org, upcoming events, and you can see it there.
Well, this has been Neil Gaur from Portal to Ascension. I'm John Edmonds Kozma, CEO of Bang Productions, owner of the TikTok Live Creator Network Agency, and host of the Unimpressed Podcast. See you next time.